Okie dokie, let's get started. So today basically I'm going to be looking at sort of creating what I call a concept of a character. I know it's probably not like it's not what it would be defined as like in a video game company or something like that, but it is sort of what I call it, and it's what I've used for other pieces of artwork before. So for example, this was the first rough character concept I did. So no shading, all just generally given the idea, has all of the details but doesn't worry about lighting or anything like that. It just gives me who the character is. I mean, I could flip it around and do the back details as well, but I haven't. Actually, let's see, can we import? Yep, so that then gave me, we'll need to make that a bit smaller. Let's go 40%. Should have got this one prepared beforehand. So that ended up allowing me to create this piece. So this character was Vorhild Ulfsdotter, a Goliath barbarian from D&D. And yeah, so that, like, having that concept made it a lot easier for me, especially putting on like all the tattoos and stuff, because in the concept it was a lot easier to put details in. It was a lot easier to just sort of add details and keep kind of going, so that by the time it came to actually drawing the character, I knew where all those details were. Whereas had I just jumped straight in, it probably wouldn't have had half of the details there. Like, the tattoos would not have been as detailed as they were, because I would have gone, it's more work, maybe I won't. So yeah, we're going to be doing it for a character who is reasonably near and dear to my heart. Gali, one of the Toa from the old LEGO Bionicles range. When I was younger, loved the movie, and well, I loved the movie Mask of Light, then of course there was Metro Nui and so on and so forth, and I loved playing with these toys. I loved watching the movies, all of it, and one of my favourites was Gali. I mean, not only was she the only female Toa, she was also pretty powerful. I mean, like, her mask ability was being able to breathe underwater, which isn't anything fancy, but to me it was quite an she was quite impressive, because being able to breathe underwater, that's kind of just standard what she can do, because she can control water, and yet she was still able to hold her own with people like Tahu, red fella, who had a mask that allowed himself to shield himself, and then Pohatu, whose mask allowed him to go really, really speedy. So Gali was still able to hold her own, despite the fact that her mask didn't really give her much. So, you know, we'll be sort of looking at her. Now, I admittedly didn't use the figures with this one. This one I sort of just threw together. And you can kind of tell, because the body is, even though it's a female, the body is a little bit more towards the masculine proportions. And by that, all I mean is the shoulders are wider, the hips don't really come out very much. Whereas if we look at this one, there's a bit more structure to it, that would remind you of sort of that kind of look. I will also note, so this part of it is, I won't be using this figure the whole time. On top of that, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to bring this arm down a bit. Yeah. Okay. Now, how does that look? Yeah, that's about right. Like the hands and stuff I'll probably change, just because that's how it tends to go. Yeah, let's see. So yeah, don't exactly want to just T-posing. So we've now got that. The other thing I do like to do, just because it saves me a lot of time, is just a nice simple symmetrical ruler. Just down the line of symmetry of the character. It also sort of gives me a better idea of how things are supposed to look. So like if I do it on one side and it's wrong on the other side, I know clearly I'm doing something wrong. Similar idea to the whole trick of sort of flipping it to the side. Yeah. So if we go like this, whoops, that's not right. Okay, why is it doing that? Why is it mirroring there? That's not right. Give me a moment. If we do it like it's annoying when this happens. Now, is this going to do it properly? Okay. No, not really. Symmetrical ruler. Number of lines, 2. Symmetry. No. Okay, I'll try this again. So why is that not doing the job? Okay, I have genuinely no idea why it's doing this. So we just won't bother with the ruler for now. Now, for this kind of work, I do like the stabilization, so basically makes it less wobbly. I do like stabilization at around about 25, maximum's 100, but yeah, so just makes it a little bit nicer. Now, I could go through and sort of create all of the basic shapes and everything, so we'd be going like circle here, all that kind of stuff, but this model actually does all of that for me, so I might as well stick with what the model gives me, and then I can go into much more detail later on. Because this figure is only going to be here for a limited amount of time. And it's basically just to get that outline and any details you think might be relevant. Because, like, for example, look at this arm. I know when I was sort of starting out, one of the things that one of the mistakes I often made was I was like, yep, arms are pretty straight, or I would try to add way too many muscles in and it would just look wrong. So doing this, it just gives you that starting point and gives you those very subtle curves that are barely noticeable when you actually look at it, but without which kind of ruin the entire piece. So we've got that, we've got that, I will actually show you just a quick trick which will allow me to do the whole mirroring thing quite easily without having to use the perspective ruler, and the trick I'll show you works with basically anything. Now for this, because I'm not going to go with bare feet, I'm going to go with some sort of shoes. I'm not going to do each of the individual toes. You don't really want to be creating more work for yourself than you need to have. As I have heard a number of times, it's the KISS rule. Keep it simple, stupid. Just basically keep it as simple as you possibly can keep it. Because if you keep it simple, then you don't really have to worry about well, then people will actually understand it and things like that. Then we just need to go Control T to transform. We set the center of rotation on the on the right, so over down near the middle, and then we just flip it that way and we keep the original image. We'll move this in a little bit just to give it that to make sure it doesn't look too strange. So now we can get rid of that figure, and we've got that. I will just add in a couple more details while that figure's there. For example, that wait a minute, we want to mirror this stuff, don't we? So we'll just do that again, except we'll just it's just sort of putting in just a couple of bits and pieces which are sort of standard standard fare. Yeah. So I've got that. Snake the ankle. Is that the ankle? Maybe not. Got sort of that bit kind of goes like that. Obviously got the, because it's a female body, the chest comes in front of the arms in this particular pose. I think that's all good. So yep, again, Control T, we set it to right, then we flip it, then we just bring it in so that it's not weird looking. And now we can get rid of that. So we now have the rough body shape for Gali as a human. And we now have to think about, okay, so what's her body gonna look like? Because that's the thing with this concept. I did the whole body first, then I layered on top of it the armor and everything that she was wearing. So the body, I'm gonna just keep her up here just a little bit. Oh, not that one. Just a little bit less. Actually, one thing I can do. Nope, not that one. This one. So we can do that. We can do expression color, monochrome, go black, so that I know the black exists. Now, do we want to increase that or decrease? Decrease that. No, we do want some sort of threshold for that. And then we can also just move her over to here. Or do we want maybe sort of over there for now? And I will just nope, never mind. That's not gonna. This is not gonna. I'm just playing around with things which I've never actually played around with, hence why it's all going a little bit funny. Clear. There we go. That's fine. Wanting to mess with me. There we go. So now we've got her over there. So the question then becomes, where do we actually start? Personally, I prefer to start with the face, because fundamentally the face is what tells us the character's story. It's what tells us who they were, who they are, all of that kind of stuff. And so the face becomes incredibly important. It'd be really good if that bloody mirroring ruler would actually do what it was supposed to, but it's not. Why not? Why not? If we do 4, and we select. No, it's not going to allow us to, because then we go like this, which is not helpful. So, sorry, I just want to figure this one out. Why is it? Why is it doing it like that? That is really annoying. Okay, maybe we'll just do the same trick as last time. Because that's the thing with, for example, this one. Almost everything is mirrored. The pauldrons are mirrored, the top is mirrored, the arms are mirrored, the lower legs are mirrored. It's only that bottom sort of rag area that's not mirrored, as well as sort of the wool coming out of the bottom of the top. Which then, yeah. So much easier if this were mirrored, but okay, we'll just have to play that game, then do half of it, and yeah. So if we have a look at her face and her eyes there, so they are reasonably round, but we want them human. Okay. So I'm just going to have a go, see how it goes. We'll make this even lighter. And then her nose. Yeah, that works. That's fine. Her nose is not very existent. However, here there is a little bit of a jutty-outy bit. It's sort of roundish. So we've got sort of almost like that kind of sort of the roundish kind of nose that you sometimes get. Like this won't be perfect at all, especially given the amount of time I've given myself. Here, so the hair we want to sort of mimic this mask kind of shape. But we don't want it to look odd. So there are sort of these two bits here. How do we want to do that? How do we want to do that? Let's try and keep it still within view. So it's just, I'm thinking braids could work, but braids are so annoying to draw, in my experience at least. Okay, so if we think about this, yeah, let's go to the chin area. So we've got a reasonably sort of flattish chin. She's got a decent well, she's got decent cheekbones for sure. So now, just because of how this has been structured, it is sort of looking up at the face. Now that's fine. Like, you can have it looking up, you can have it looking down, whatever you want to have. So we have that. Now this, let's sort of add in, that's just sort of like the tear duct bit, which kind of makes the eyes a bit more believable. We have that. That sort of goes like... So even though she's a lady, she does have a very strong jawline. Probably comes from being a robot, but that's fine. Now the ears, we can just sort of go sort of standard fare with those. Although I do them with her, I didn't quite flat with her once, didn't I? So that will then go inwards. So that's a thing that the model doesn't show, sort of, unless of course you angle it, how the head does kind of go in a little bit around where the temple is. Not much. I mean, even this might be too much, but it does roughly do the job. Where the temple is, sorry, I'm just referring to my own head at the moment. That's one thing. As an artist, one of the best resources you have is your own body. Just refer to your own body and you probably get it right, unless of course you're 1 in a million in regards to your anatomy. That's so that. That'll go. And for the mouth, sort of goes down a bit there, and then it does have sort of the... So this is where you sort of have to pick and choose what parts of reality are you using and what parts of the character are you using. Now this is going to have to change just because, as you can see, I kind of slant my stuff a little bit. Does have a bit of a skews, but that's pretty easy to shift. I mean, I suppose if we go, yeah, oh, that's a thought. I'm just still thinking about how to do the hair. If we do it like that, we have it all sort of bunching together towards not necessarily a braid, but sort of some hair kind of going backwards, and we'll figure out what to do with that later. And then we have, so that kind of look. I'm going to give her a bit more here just to allow for the aesthetic that we're probably going for. Well, that I'm going for. Yeah. So having sort of more of that feminine face. We've got, actually this needs to be a little bit bigger, so that can almost kind of go like that, come back in there, and then sort of go like that, and we can even have sort of bits of it sort of and a bit funny or something, and again we'll figure all of this out. So now we've got sort of kind of thing. And we can bring all of this sort of hair coming up so that we almost get like this almost like this tunnel of hair. It's going to be a weird look, but I mean, this is a robot that we're drawing, well, as a human. And we sort of get that kind of thing. Yeah. And now, if we have a look at this, she has very impressive eyebrows. Almost like elven eyebrows. So we're going to give her those. Because who doesn't like some impressive fantasy eyebrows? I must say, eyebrows, as long as they're not boring ones, are one of the funnest parts to draw, in my opinion. So we've got that. Now we'll have the neck coming down, and there's going to be sort of that a little bit coming in where sort of those muscles come in, because I mean, she's not exactly weak. She's clearly able to hold her own. And then we have, maybe I'll bring these up a little bit. Yeah. And we'll actually note, so yes, this is the one that I've done in the past, like this is the example I've used, and that's sort of the first one. That was the first concept of a character I ever did. Then I think this was actually the second one. So I believe we go down to scene 1. Yeah. So that was like the second one I did. Less symmetry in the clothes. I wouldn't say it's necessarily my best piece though. And then I'll just go through one more. Here's another. Don't have too many more anyway. So then there's this one, who was for a half-orc, female, I will note, female half-orc paladin who follows a war god. So yeah, again, the body relatively symmetrical, and a lot of the stuff is symmetrical, but then of course there's the one shoulder pauldron, then there's the knife, then there's the tooth spike thingy, and then the rag that isn't. So we can keep it symmetrical because it makes everything easier, but if you can't, don't worry about that too much. So we've got that, and this is why I have the music in the background, because I probably won't talk much for the next little bit. Just sort of showing that she has that musculature. As I said, she's not weak. She's not weak, but she's not like massively bulky either. So that's something to keep in mind. She's not going to have like poof, arms like that. But she will have sort of noticeable musculature. However, that's a little bit low actually. Sort of that. Yeah. So we got sort of that going on. And then again, so I sort of have those muscles, but not overly obvious, so I might sort of put in a little bit here to indicate musculature, but on the whole, nothing too fancy. Like, yeah, to be honest with you, with this sort of side of the process that I use, this is more to do with getting the details, so the clothing details and things like that. I don't always do it, just sometimes. And yeah, I'll be going over this stuff properly in more, this line work properly in more detail. So I mean, we take that away and we are starting to get something that looks reasonable. I mean, the mouth is ludicrously small. Kind of a side effect of using a manga anime software. So Clip Studio Paint originally used for manga and anime and all that kind of stuff. So it does tend to go with dimensions, bodily dimensions that are a little bit funky. But that's fine. We can address that quite easily. This, I'm going to up the stabilization, because doing these is not a simple matter. Actually quite complex body parts. And you kind of have that part, and then it almost, so you might kind of get like this kind of thing. It's more noticeable in people who are a bit too skinny, because that's just kind of how it works. But at this point, I'm not too worried about whether she looks too skinny or anything. I'm just sort of colouring that in to sort of suggest the armpit sort of crook kind of a bit, even though it's not there, but it would create a dark patch. Now her dimensions are a little bit odd. Her torso is not particularly long, and if we have a look here, it's not particularly wide either. So we can take a bit of creative license here. Just simply because that's how she is structured. Then with the legs, the hips do come out, so we've got that happening. And then the thighs aren't like small, because again, muscle. So we can have that. That's sort of showing the knee. And we can have... Now, most people will agree knees are not the most glamorous part of the body, and so you do kind of get a little bit of funky stuff happening. I might adjust the calves just to be a little bit more noticeable without being super obvious. And so then we have just bringing them out that little bit and giving them a little bit more of an edge to it, whilst not making it be like, yeah, this thing isn't real. Go. And so now we've got that. Now, just because, like, yes, there's that thigh gap there, but realistically, it's not really going to be. So we'll leave that there, and it's going to be covered over with clothing anyway. So we've got all of that. We might want to throw in that kind of a muscle or two. And these are just sort of rough indications of how it's supposed to kind of look. There's that. Actually, let's just move that to the side a little bit, or else we'll probably lose it when we do the flippy flip. Okay. We'll just adjust some of that a little bit more as well. Get rid. Slightly get rid of that. There. So if we select like half of this, so let's go from like here. Oops, didn't quite select everything. Okay, there, and then we get rid of whatever's outside it, and then we transform it. And this time we're making it the left, and we flip it but keep the original image. And I mean, for the most part, it's done the job. I mean, yeah, she has a massive nose, but yeah, we can sort that out. So we can get rid of that layer. Oh, and we need to sort of put something in there. Yeah. So now we've got this. We can start thinking about oh, turns out the thigh gap did show up. Fair enough. We can start thinking about sort of what kind of clothing is going to go onto there. Now, with that clothing, that's where we sort of look at the armor and stuff. So we've got a new layer, and we can start putting the armor. Like, I'm actually quite happy with how the line work sort of ended up for the base, so I'm not actually going to go over it again. Like, looks a bit funky, but the thing is, she's the same both ways, so it's fine. So if you think about the Toa, so they've got like those shoulder pads, got a chest plate, their arms kind of flare out. Now I'm tossing up whether I make that fabric or whether I make that some sort of armor. So the question now becomes, what era are we looking at? Like, is this someone who's living in a D&D world, or is this someone who's living in the modern day, or is it someone from the future? Given her hairstyle, I'm going to guess she doesn't live in the past, because that kind of hairstyle would, I'm not entirely sure it would go down well. Because, I mean, it is an odd hairstyle, which we'll figure it all out at some point. Actually, I might just touch up the mouth, just because we did have to resize that a bit. I mean, she does look a bit alien, but that's alright. I mean, there are human beings who don't look quite like everyone else, and that's fine. That's A-okay. So I'm going to say, like, present day. Now, I'm just going to give her just simple earrings, because she wouldn't want anything that anyone could grab onto, given that she's probably going to be sort of in a fight. Like, given her body, she's clearly capable of holding her own. I am, however, just to sort of explain this kind of body, let's adjust where the belly button is. Just to explain the really thin body, I am going to use sort of like a corset kind of look on the body. So, and this is where it would probably be helpful to have that. No, we'll just look up sort of images, corset, a modern, let's go with a modern corset. I'm just looking at this on Google Images. I've got like a bunch of screens, so means I can sort of look at stuff all over the place. I mean, there are ridiculous ones, but then there are also reasonable looking ones. So, for example, we've got this one, which we can increase by, let's say, 300. Nope. Need to make sure it's the top left and then 300. Yeah, so we can use sort of that kind of look. However, it doesn't quite pinch in enough. Oh yeah, that works, I suppose. So then we've got something like this. Let's size that up quite a bit. top left, 500. It's going to go a little bit blurry, but that's right. So we can look at something like this. So it starts to come over the hips a bit, and it just sort of peeks in underneath the chest. So if we move that over to like here, we get rid of that one, and then we can work on this. So this is on a layer on top of the skin layer. What we can do actually in behind the skin layer, so this is something I'll often do in the early stages just because I like to. Simple as that, really. So we can go a skin color, but maybe with a hint of sort of a hint of blue there. Whoops. Need a layer in behind. Yeah. So got that. And then what we want to do, we have an overlay layer, and with that we can then sort of put in a light blue kind of color, except we'll bring it down to about 50%, unless I'm just going to sort of play around with a few things. What happens if we go multiply? Well, that becomes interesting. That's not bad, but maybe not. I mean, there's add, but that's just going to make it white. Yeah. Soft light. Yeah, doesn't really do anything. No. Divide. No, that definitely doesn't work. No, that gets rid of that. Dodge. No, that's definitely not right. So yeah, we'll go overlay. We'll jump down to about 50% opacity, and that can be her skin color. And then what I can do is I can select the hair. Now her hair is definitely her hair is definitely going to be like a bluish color. Now you'll notice I went over the eyebrow. That's because if you think about it, the eyebrow is going to be the same color as the hair. So there we go. And I'm just selecting in multiple parts just because it's a bit easier. That's the thing, you don't want work to be hard if you can avoid it at all. And yes, the ears are still there, but I will deal with those in due time. That needs a bit more. Generally I'll do the adding first, then I'll do the subtracting, just because otherwise it all gets messy. There we are. So now we can subtract. I think that's the cheekbone coming through, so yeah, why not? Let's stick with it. Whoops, subtract. Why not stick with it? Right. And then what I'll do, now that I've selected all this, you can see that it's all selected outside it as well. But what I can do is I can, no, not clip, lock the layer. And we're not going to go that blue, that kind of blue. I think I like that one more. Maybe? Maybe not. Actually, let's take the blue from Gali herself. There we go. Oh, whoops. Forgot to add in the eyebrows. Got some of the eyebrows, but not the whole thing. Yeah, fill that in, and I'm just going to clear it from there, so that ends up giving us a better colour for all of. Oops, better colour for all of that, and we'll just get rid of that. Yeah, and now her eyes are like glowing. I'm not gonna go with that. So like that. Sorry, my process does tend to be a little bit bitsy and all over the place sometimes. It's just, that's how it works for me. If I try to do something for too long, I can get a little bit bored if I don't know that there's something else I can do. If I know there's something else I can do and then I like go and do it, then it's fine. Now, if we go with, maybe we'll go with sort of that darkish reddish kind of colour. Except no, most of that's not going to be like that. Most of it's going to be white, and then we have this darkish reddish kind of colour inside around the pupil. Just that darkish reddish colour is a more likely colour for eyes, and it actually works quite nicely for the tear duct spot. Yeah. Another benefit of doing things this way, it means that I have all of the colours that I need already there. Anyhow, let's get back to throwing on that corset onto her. So I'm going to go back to black. So we've got almost sort of a this kind of actually I'll make this blue so that we can actually let's go like bright green kind of, yeah, sure, why not, or even better actually, border effect, just so that we can sort of see where it is that I'm putting all of this. Now we can see here there is a little bit of a flat section there, so it's going to be sort of like that, like that. Now it's actually going to come up underneath and lift all of this, so like we won't actually see it so much. Actually no, it won't lift, it'll just come in behind, which is fine. And yeah, so now we've got sort of this kind of thing going on, and then as we can see down here, it does sort of come together, sort of kind of going up and then down. So we've got sort of that corset look, and if we even wanted to, we could even sort of throw in those lines to indicate sort of how it's all coming together and everything. Yeah. Then we would have sort of this line down the middle, and that would have sort of those. Personally, I'm a fan of sort of the lace-up ones, so I'm going to go with that kind of a look. When I say fan of a lace-up, I mean for the aesthetics, of course. So we've got that. We'll probably get rid of the outer lining sort of thing there. But I'll keep it there because we've got more to add. Now, if we have a look here, so if we're going with making her like modern, I'm almost thinking something like jeans, so similar to what's here. Yep, so that sort of comes out there. The jeans themselves sort of crease inwards around the knee. So something, I was watching a video just the other day, you can find points of compression and points of extension. So compression is usually when there's a lot of slack in a piece of clothing, when it's not being stretched out, and then extension is when it's being stretched over a joint. So that sort of like around here you've got that compression going on. However, actually, yeah, no, so I would think she'd sort of have bootleg kind of jeans. So not quite flares, but also not, yeah, but her musculature would be so that it would sort of stretch in a little bit, and then we'd have where it goes in, we'd have sort of that little bit there, and then it sort of gets stretched out again at that point. So I'm just going to select this part and flip it around. Keep the original, yep. And we can sort of have that there, and that makes my life easy. There we go. So we've got the jeans, we've got sort of the corset kind of look. I'm personally a fan of coats. I mean, we do have to figure out what sort of shirt she's going to be wearing underneath, all of that. What kind of cut would she go for? I will admit, looking at this, I'm getting sort of like night elf kind of vibes. So I'm just going to look up Tyrande from Warcraft and look at sort of what kind of attire she would wear, which is definitely not the kind of attire this person would be wearing. Nope, not even the battle armor really. Although there is actually one look. So this one found on Pinterest by Clara Jezebeth on Deviant Art. So let's boost that, make it a bit bigger. So that kind of look with like the neck piece, and then the clothes going up to the neck piece. I would probably have the clothing actually filling all the way through into the neck piece. But that ribbing sort of kind of pattern, I think I will go with that. Adds a little bit more visual detail, plus is a little bit similar to shells and stuff, which, oops, we want to get rid of that. Didn't realize that was there. It does kind of look similar to a shell pattern almost. So we have that. So if we have sort of the neck piece kind of coming like that there, might not necessarily be the same sort of jewelry look, but we can sort of go with a similar kind of look. And again, this is all designed to be sort of very, very rough. So then what we can do is we can, so this part, even though it is connecting up through into there, it is going to sort of go like that. Will we have something in between? No, I don't think we will. I think, yeah, so this will and then that'll continue up that way. So we've got, yeah, so like this gives a bit of visual interest because it tells us where all the shapes are going. So you'll notice that the curve is getting less and less and lesser because it's getting to a point wherein it's actually curving the other way. And so then we'd also have sort of that kind of thing, and then sort of something right smack dab in the middle. So we're doing that. So again, I'm just selecting this to then sort of save myself some work. So that goes sort of over there, goes there, goes up a little bit. However, that side has a slight change just because it wasn't quite symmetrical there. Go. Now, because this is going to be more sort of realistic than it is going to be like fantasy, whereas Tyrande on the other hand is very much a fantasy character, I'm going to make more of this fabric than it would be if it were armor. So we can get rid of that reference. So we got that. Sort of have that coming back around. That sort of thing. There were sort of frills on it, which this person, I get the feeling they'd be keen for frills, just from the looks of them. Yeah. Also would be sort of up like so. Go. Sounds like the music has stopped. I should deal to that. No, it's just a momentary blip. So I've got that going on, and that sort of joins in there, sort of joins in there, that going in down to there, going down to there. So I do try to not have them like massively well endowed because it's just makes it a little bit pointless, but just because of the structure of it, there will be a little bit of that going on with the sort of the going over the side. Maybe not that much, but yeah. And maybe we'll put in sort of that kind of a look. So if we get rid of the edging, the edge details, so we've got that kind of look going on. Now we want sort of big shoulders because they do have them. So we're probably looking at some sort of blazer kind of a thing. maybe. So again, I'm just looking up some reference. Woman. I'm always thinking like the big, like shoulder jacket kind of things, like shoulder blazers, but shoulder pads. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe. Oh, no. Sorry, I saw something that might have worked, but no. Not quite. The problem is when I see blazers with shoulder pads, I'm just like, why? Because it's purely a fashion statement as opposed to something a little bit more sensible. Although I've just found a jacket that I think I just like the look of. There we are. And we can, actually I'm going to, no, we don't want to keep the original image. I'm going to sort of overlay this. So again, you can overlay stuff, and sure it won't, like not every image will work perfectly for you, but it gets a decent idea going and lets us see roughly where it'll fall. Yeah. And how we would adjust it accordingly. Actually, what I'll do is I'll actually put it in underneath that. Have it like that. For this, we'll bring back the. Maybe. Well, we'll make the edges a little bit less thick. So I've got that, and that will sort of do the job. So now we can. We'll make it marginally lighter just so I can see this, the bodily structure in behind. So this can start coming in like so. However, do I have it closed or not? I think I'll have it kind of closed, but just sort of with a single button. And then we can have that sort of coming up like so, and then around like that. And because it's not a corset, it will have sort of some bunching happening around there. Corsets are designed to bunch, like do all of that stuff. So yeah, that's a different story, really. But now what we can do is we can get rid of so much of the work that we just did. That shouldn't be like that. Yeah. Get rid of that. I mean, we can still see it on the other side, so if we change our mind, it'll still be there. And we do have to remember like what was there before, so that we remember what it is we're laying on top of what. Because different pieces of clothing will interact. Like, let's say you have a tight t-shirt on top of a singlet, you're gonna be able to tell that that singlet's there. But if you have a loose top on, it's not so going to be so helpful with a singlet, but it could be helpful maybe if you've got something in your pocket, that sort of thing. So now we go It's sort of the I think it's the lapel. I think that's what it's called. So we've got that, and this is where we sort of go like that, and now we have to sort of do it like that. Now I am gonna sort of still put some of those musculature lines in with the clothing. You'll be able to tell it's clothing because it's a bit bunched, just because I want it to almost look like what she's wearing is a bit tight. Like she wanted a really nice piece of clothing, but then it turned out that it was like not the right size or something like that. Now these lines here are sort of coming from the armpit outwards. I'm not sure they would be quite that long though. And so then we have here we can come in like that, and there we sort of notice where those other lines all sort of joint together. Just gonna up the size of these edges so I can more clearly see where it is I'm going. And so then we've got something like that. Although that jacket actually that's going to be sort of that kind of a thing. There we are. And so again we can select all of this. And hopefully I'm selecting the right spot. Yeah, and go transform, we flip it, we move it over to the other side, and we keep the original image. Yeah, that's about right. Maybe down a smidge. There we go. So again, we can just erase through all of those bits that are now lying underneath, because I'm happy with sort of how this is looking. So I'm gonna, oops, nope, that's not, there we are, that's a line we want to get rid of. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with sort of how it's all looking, so I'm gonna stick with this particular design. Just have to fill in some of those details which weren't picked up when I did the copy. That's alright. There we go. So we've now got sort of roughly the clothing. There will be more details added on and all of that sort of thing. I'm just gonna sort of put a button going across. It's not very pretty, but that's right. Now we can sort of around all of that. Hasn't quite done what I was hoping for, because there must be some sort of empty space somewhere. Let's just close gap. There we go, that's better. So now we can again layer on top. I will take sort of a little bit of that Gali kind of colour. Maybe not quite like that. Oh, also we need to get rid of the edging. Maybe more of that colour. Because admittedly at the moment it does kind of look... Oh, actually I can do that, and then that. No, I said lock. Yeah, that's a little bit better. And then we can come in and sort of select specific areas. So I like the idea of the corsets sort of being black and white, and so I'm going to stick with that look. And odds are at some point I'll probably make this line work a bit better, but for the time being it works. And it may even work for the end, because a concept of a character does not have to be all fancy and polished. It gives you the idea of who the character is, where they come from, all of that kind of stuff. Now I will just note, if you're going to do black, don't do black, do very, very, very dark sort of blue. So I can almost go in sort of there, and that's sort of a good colour for this. And then staying with that, we can sort of come up a little bit, and we can use the marker with maximum stabilization to sort of bring in that, like that colour. However, I do actually want it brighter. So underlying all the colours here are going to be blue, is going to be blue because Gali blue. If I were doing Liwa, Toa of Air, it would be green, so on and so forth. And I'm just going to put in one here, because that's the thing, we can't actually see them elsewhere. So we might as well put one in there, and maybe just one more there. Go. That does that, sort of that pinstripe kind of look, and I'll just get rid of those lines there because they kind of ruin it for the other ones. Yeah. And then sort of the blouse area, I'll go with white. That's a nice standard kind of colour. I may throw in a hint of red to get an almost just something a little bit closer to like what you'd get on a seashell. That's bad. Yeah. So go down here to all the colours. Let's try that one and we'll just see if it works. Doesn't quite work for the whole thing. I'm going to go more into the red and also more into the white. Yeah, actually maybe even going that far. Yeah, that's not bad. Now the jacket, So the last one, because the pants I'm happy to keep because they're jeans. Happy to keep them that colour. But the pants, oh, actually what we can do is we can select all of the blue, and we just deselect the pants. Now you'll notice in some cases some of the skin from the background is still coming through. I'll fix that up later. It's fine. Oh, whoops. Accidentally lost that part. There we go. Okay. So for this, I kind of do want to go darker. Oh, almost, yeah, that sort of darkish purple, except we'll go a lot darker. And we'll fill in with that, maybe a little bit lighter than that. There we go. Oh, and select the already selected part. And that ends up, so that section, that's where I'll sort of bring in a little bit of green, I think. Sort of sea green. Let's have a look for that. Maybe not. Maybe we need a little bit more blue to it than that. Maybe lighter. Yeah, that throws some colour in, and all through that bit will be lots and lots of detail. So various bits of detail. Also need to think about feet, don't I? Feet. Because I've been going for quite a while now, I will stop at that. I'll continue this one tomorrow. And yeah, we can sort of go from there. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for today. Do have a good day and don't work too hard.